Look, good morning to each and everyone. Blessings again to forward back on the platform. Really appreciate you guys. It's Monday. Hope you guys having now a wonderful day so far. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Loads of sports. Competitive games, still preseason in action and stuff like that. But when you're talking about the regular boy players, quite a few regular boy players, back in fold again for their new team, getting minutes under their belt, meanwhile some it's still mixed feelings, between them and the club and the manager. But I want to get into the one that I'm talking about, Kaheim Dixon. I was watching a show over the weekend just before their first game versus Reading at home, and I was watching the preview on the Charlton Athletic page of they're previewing the team in the championship, and they highlighted a squad up on the screen, and there was no Kaheim Dixon was in that first team squad where Nathan Jones will choose from. I know there will still be academy players that will be in around the mix, but the important player seems like Kaheim Dixon is not in the fold of that 25-man squad going into the championship. And again, they can name more than 25 man in a squad in the EFL championship, but I'm going to get there as well. And Mikel Antonio, there's a few rumors, going around with Mikel Antonio. Is it that he's going to sign for a new club? We saw him over the weekend as well on TV discussing Crystal Palace and Liverpool and TNT Sports, doing his first, bits of punditry after got released from West Ham. There's just quite a few stuff that need to talk about. The Cephas matter. He came off the bench again in around the 60 something minute. Lewis Baker got on the score sheet again, for Stoke City, for Mark Robbins, looking forward for something to be competitive in around that top six. If they can be a little bit more clinical, where they can challenge and try to get something close as possible to that top six. So good things, good times, around, Stoke City again. Where did I go from here? The Mason Greenwood story of him playing Aston Villa over the weekend as well at home in Marseille, where they just having some bit of hustle and bustle, and I don't know what was going on that pitch. Even both managers was going at it. So quite a few stuff over that happened over the weekend that can talk about, but I'm just going to hit the important one and touch and go. Whatever you want to discuss in the comment, you can bring it up in the comment section as well. But I will be right back after this. But again, the Kaheim Dixon, the situation around Kaheim Dixon, 2021, not quite sure the age, but 2021. He's not nowhere past 21, but 2021, for him, he age, play loads of game, in the academy last season. He would have been playing in the Premier League Cup, he'd have playing, I think there's a other league format as well. So he'd have been involved in quite a few games, for the academy team. I think he got like 5 appearances last season in off the bench for the senior team in League One as well. Wasn't really in the mix, wasn't really in the fold, as you say, a lot of times, for Nathan Jones in the League One. Look, he traveled with the team. The team went to, like Slovenia, Slovakia. They played a couple of preseason games out there. He was in the mix as well. He got minutes, in preseason for Charlton Athletic. And you would say, look, after coming off not really a very good Gold Cup as well, but a very good Unity Cup. Kaheim Dixon is someone that almost played 20 games, for the national team and scored like 3-4 goals, for the national team. I don't think his profile as a player, regardless of if he's not ready, if his development is not ready as yet, for the senior team in the championship, regardless of that, there should be a spot somewhere, in a senior team for Kaheim Dixon. Is it that, it's the right time, for him, to go out on loan? I know, look, he's still a player that, Charlton have all a lot of value, and, he still have like what he's going into. After this season and the 25-26, he still have 2 more years left back on his contract, so he might have 3 full year left back on his contract. So I don't see any real push, to get him out of the football club, or try to get a buyer for him. But at this moment, this is the right time for him to go to a different club, get that experience. Is it that a loan move in England will do him well? Drop down in the next year back into League One, or go to League Two, where a team can give him that minutes, will guarantee him that minutes. He will be in our first team. So I don't think Kaheim Dixon going into about the academy, I don't think that will really help his development at this moment. If you look at the player, he's improving. His body, the physiques is getting better. So you want to add on that. After I would say it is. I would say it was a very good preseason for him. And I think tip it off. With the start of the season, get him into a first team setup, and I think that will help him. Big man football at this moment will help Kaheim Dixon, and I think League One or League Two will be the best suitors for him at this moment. You want to stay in England as long as possible. You don't want to take up a loan deal to go somewhere, in a smaller European country, like a Slovenia, Romania, Bulgaria. These countries, you don't want to just take up a loan deal to go to one of those countries. You want to at least stay in England, where eyes will be on you. If you're doing something good in that league, League One, League Two, coaches, everybody will be hearing about what is Kaheim Dixon doing. You don't want to go too far away from England. But again, what I'm hearing, that Kaheim Dixon is not in the first team setup of Nathan Jones' preference going into the new season. This is what I saw on Charlton Athletic TV. The guys, the pundits for the football club, discussing what's next for the team going into their first game in the championship. And they did won that game at home, late games, late goal scored by names, a player that they bought from Reading. So the football clubs kickstart the championship season on a positive note with 3 points at home. They're marching on as it's the first game. But again, there should be some level of concern of where is Kaheim Dixon at this moment for Charlton Athletic. And moving on, Mikel Antonio, there's a few reports that's going out that the player agent has recommend him to train with a team that he once used to play for in the past, Sheffield Wednesday, and that team is in a championship. And there's reports that the player is currently at this moment training with the football club, and he's not the only you say free agent player that is looking for a club that who is at the club at this moment, is training with that football club. And again, a former Leeds captain, Liam Cooper, and Ben Mee, a former Burnley captain, top player once for Sean Dyche in the Premier League. Those two players, those two centre half, currently at this moment is training with Sheffield Wednesday. And this club is in financial crisis. It's in player crisis. We saw Jamal Lowe start over the weekend at Leicester City Stadium, at King Power. They lost that game, scored first in that game. But again, where does it fit, for Mikel Antonio at Sheffield? And there are a few slight rumors that the player is looking, on there are slight rumors in it. It's not something that heavily been talked about, but again, it seems like Everton is in the mix as well. We saw Mikel Antonio came on TV and he talked about there are clubs, there are discussions. It's just for him to pick the right one. And I'm going to say this, like, if Mikel Antonio cannot find a club in the next couple of weeks, I don't think the national team should be going with Mikel Antonio in that squad coming up in September. To be honest, there should be no place for a Mikel Antonio if the player is not playing for a football club coming by the end of the transfer window. Look, the national team, we have too much passengers. Yes, we have too much passengers and conductors on that team. We need players that they are going to lead the national team into the right direction. We need players that having minutes under their belt, because if you're looking at the minutes that Reggae Boys players been playing since the competitive seasons have started around the world, it's not really good compared to what other national team players been having success, been having minutes on the pitch. It's not looking good for the national team. So we have too much passengers, we have too much conductors. I think what we really need in this national team at this moment, we need bus drivers, someone that going to steer us into the right direction. People that willing, to do the effort, people willing to put in that minimum yards in that for the national team and do whatever it takes. But again, how fit is a Mikel Antonio? Yeah, how fit is that player? I know, coming off a preseason with the U21s, how much that of a guarantee that the player is in a good shape. And there's a lot of doubts that teams are not really 100% guarantee that Mikel Antonio was at the same standard of where before the crash happened. So there's still a little bit of concern of the level of the player, his injury that he sustained in that car crash as well. So there's a little bit of concern. But again, what I'm hearing that the player being offered by his agent that he's training with a former team, Sheffield Wednesday, and Sheffield Wednesday, Deshaun Bernard is still out of that football club. Not going to be back until late September, early October as well. Still recovering, from that knee injury. So again, moving on, the game, even I was talking about that game that Sheffield played at King Power Stadium versus Leicester City. Bobby Reid was nowhere to be found, in around that Leicester City squad as well. We talk about that as well, previously on this show that, the manager, Cifuentes is going into a different direction, moving on from players like Bobby Reid, Ndidi, you see, Cody, a couple players have left the football club already. And again, Ronaldo Sifa's team lost over the weekend. Yes, Ronaldo Sifa's team lost over the weekend. They yet to get anything on the board, and it's a game that they didn't score. Ronaldo Sifa's came on in that game, played the last half hour of that game. Again, didn't really see much of Ronaldo Sifa's, but it's concern again. His team is hitting that rock bottom situation where they're still without a win in the Russian Premier League. I think that's what their fourth or their fifth game after league campaign already. I think the next couple of games they have some cup games coming up as well. But let's see again. We're still monitoring that situation over there in Russia. But again, quite a few players like Demarai Gray, played minutes, but a player like Demarai Gray put in a hard shift in as well for Birmingham City, versus Ipswich Town at St Andrews. He got a lot of minutes under his belt, so these are the moments that you want to see, Demarai Gray getting minutes under his belt. Roman Burrell came on again, for QPR. I think he played versus Preston North End in the championship as well, making his QPR debut at Loftus Road. And there's still a bit of concern of why Jonathan Russell isn't getting the minutes that he did play, in last season as well. Someone that, one of the highest goal scoring, on that team as well of last season. You think that minutes will be guaranteed coming off that very, very high season for Barnsley. And, Lewis Baker got on the score sheet, for Stoke City. A team looking like a new team, a team that seems like they can travel, somewhere close to around the top 8 and give some big effort trying to get, somewhere around 8, 7, somewhere close to as possible. They can push for a playoff spot. But again, with a very good manager as Mark Robbins, Lewis Baker is playing under that manager. He came back, from his loan spell cut short when he was at Blackburn, and he came back in January. Mark Robbins, sent for him and cut that loan deal, wanted Lewis Baker in his plans. And I think, since January until the end of the campaign, I think May, Lewis Baker, have scored like 5 goals. And again, Lewis Baker and John Russell, talking about players that one represent the national team and the other that thought that, in the future he will represent the team in somewhere in the near future. And those two players were our most high profile midfield players that got goals, playing minutes, playing, very good as well. And I think, Lewis Baker isn't even the answer to even a backup. I know if Lewis Baker, really be cleared by FIFA that is available at this point to represent the national team, he will be a sure starter, the quality that the player have. But again, we still need players that can complement Isaac Hayden. We still need players, backup players for Isaac Hayden as well. And Lewis Baker isn't that player that will sit deep. I don't think they really have that discipline. I think Lewis Baker is a player that is more to look at getting in and around in the advanced era, get something kind of twiggling in that final third as well. He is that player want to get in the mix after attack. So I don't think he's a player that will be disciplined, will sit in a hole like Isaac Hayden. And again, if that player get through the door of the national team, get his clearance from FIFA, things should be looking good. But again, he's a goal scoring midfielder. He's something that we don't have at this moment for the national team. Goals is what we really lack from midfield. John Russell came in and he picked up off where he left off the League One season and just started to score goals in the Unity Cup. I remember if he scored in the Gold Cup, but he scored loads of goals since his return back to the national team. And again, Lewis Baker can also follow as well of getting goals from midfield for the national team. And I think Lewis Baker is more of a 8 or more of a 10. Again, someone that want to get in an advanced era. But the Mason Greenwood, situation of where, Mason Greenwood, played Aston Villa over the weekend. Look, I'm going to say this. Marseille players, going into the new season, going to play in different countries in the Champions League. Mason Greenwood going to need protection from his players. Yeah? Things like what happened, versus Aston Villa. I know things can happen in real quick split seconds, of what Tyrone Mings and Mason Greenwood got themselves into, where it was a tug of war and stuff like that. But again, the big boys for Marseille, they're going to have to protect a Mason Greenwood going to some big games into the Champions League. But you see the level of hatred that these players, especially the UK players, have on Mason Greenwood. And if you could see the comment sections of some comments of some fans disturbing messages under Aston Villa page about they highly giving the praises of a Tyrone Mings, they should have punched Mason Greenwood in his face. There's some awful comments there, and they say, hey, if Mings didn't do anything good in the game, there's one thing that they can praise him for, is to get the hell out of a Mason Greenwood. And look, the goal that Mason Greenwood took, and he scored wonderful goal. This player has so much potential. This player has so much quality at this moment, where you will say, look, this player is out of this world in terms of the goals, the finish, left, right, dribble with your left, dribble with your right. You can get it on both sides, from Mason Greenwood. But again, it will be lovely to see a Mason Greenwood playing in the Champions League in England and England side against a Premier League club. And you want to see the player go through these type of atmosphere where he will get boo, see where his headspace is at this moment, because I don't think he really get that harsh treatment. I think going back to England to play Champions League, that will be a big reality check of where he stand amongst a lot of the English fans again. But it's not looking good of what went wrong with Aston Villa, Tyrone Mings and Greenwood. But Greenwood is up for the fight, he's up for the challenge, and mentally he's ready. You could see that he's ready. Again, he's on such form in the preseason that I think he scored like 5-6 goals already. So he's ready for the new season, for the Liga season. He's ready to push Paris Saint-Germain. Let's see how much this Marseille team, the recruitments that they have made over the last couple of months, let's see how they can gel with the players that was there of last season, add the quality as well going into the new season. Let's see how they can compete also in the Champions League. But again, Mason Greenwood is up for the fight, and you love to see the player get in challenges like that. And you don't really want to see a boring game of football. You don't want to see a game where it's just going too easy. You want him to get challenged, both physically and mentally, from the fans, from the players on the pitch. And that's where I leave it, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'm out. Peace out. Thanks for watching. This is Nicardo Media House with another Morning Insider video. Ciao, ciao, people. I'm out.